Ever feel like your eyes are, staging their own little desert drama? Dry, scratchy, sometimes even a bit gritty.
Yeah, I know the feeling. It's definitely not fun.
Not fun at all. And you wouldn't believe how many people are right there with you, dealing with the same dry eye dilemmas. But the good news is there are solutions out there, like the research paper you sent over, Intense Pulse Light Therapy, IPL, for dry eyes. That was fascinating.
Right. It's not something people usually associate with eye care, is it?
It really isn't.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this deep dive to unpack what this IPL therapy is all about, especially for this thing called meibomian gland dysfunction, or MGD, which I have to admit I'd never even heard of before.
And that's the thing, so many people haven't, but it's incredibly common, and often a really sneaky culprit behind those persistent dry eye woes.
Sneaky is right. It's like these meibomian glands are playing hide and seek with our eye health. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, could you give us a little anatomy lesson? What exactly are these mysterious meibomian glands, and what's their connection to dry eyes?
Absolutely. So imagine this. You blink. Simple, right?
We all do it, hopefully multiple times a minute.
Exactly. And every time you blink, your eyelids actually spread this super thin film of tears over your eyes.
Okay, makes sense. Tears, lubrication. Got it.
Right. But here's where it gets a little more complex. This tear film isn't just water. It's actually made up of 3 layers, and each one has a very specific job to do.
3 layers. That's more complicated than I would guessed.
Right. So you've got a mucin layer, which basically helps the tears stick to the surface of your eye. Then there's the watery layer, the one we all think of when we think tears. That's for moisture, obviously. But then, and this is where those meibomian glands come in, there's an oily layer.
Wait, oily tears? That doesn't sound like a good thing.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But that oily layer is crucial. It's like a sealant. Prevents the water in your tears from evaporating too quickly. And guess what? Produces that oil.
Let me guess. Those meibomian glands we were just talking about.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. Those tiny glands lining your eyelids are responsible for that oily layer that keeps your eyes comfortable. And when they don't function properly, that's when you get MGD, meibomian gland dysfunction. Either they get blocked, or the oil they produce gets all thick and goopy. Either way, not a good situation for your tear film.
So, kind of like a clogged pipe, but for your eyes.
Perfect analogy. And just like a clogged pipe in your house can lead to all sorts of issues, clogged meibomian glands wreak havoc on your eyes. Dryness, irritation, the works.
That's where this whole IPL thing comes in, right? Potentially blasting those blockages away.
Well, not exactly blasting, but using light in a way you might not expect. It's pretty fascinating, actually.
So just to be clear, we're talking about using light, actual beams of light, to help with dry eyes. I have to admit, it sounds a little too good to be true.
It does sound a little out there, right? But it's not as far-fetched as you might think. Remember how we were talking about IPL being used for skin treatments?
Yeah, for things like rosacea and sun damage and stuff.
Exactly. And it turns out that some of the same principles apply to treating MGD. See, IPL can actually target those pesky blood vessels around your eyes, the ones that can get all inflamed and contribute to the problem.
Okay, so it's going after the inflammation, not necessarily blasting away the blockages directly.
You got it. It's more about creating the right environment for those meibomian glands to do their thing.
Okay, that's making a little more sense. So how does it work? Is it like zapping those blood vessels away with a laser beam?
Not exactly zapping, no. It's more about shrinking them. So IPL devices, they emit these very specific wavelengths of light. And those wavelengths, they're absorbed by the hemoglobin in your blood.
Hemoglobin, that's the stuff that carries oxygen. Right.
Yep, that's the one. And when that light hits the hemoglobin, it creates a bit of heat. And that heat is what causes those tiny blood vessels to constrict, to basically shrink down.
Okay, so less blood flow, less inflammation.
I get it.
Precisely. And with less inflammation, the meibomian glands can, well, they can breathe a sigh of relief and get back to work.
And start producing that nice, high-quality oil that our eyes are so desperately craving.
You know it. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The research you sent over, it actually compares using IPL on its own versus combining it with this other technique called meibomian gland expression, or MGX for short.
MGX. Okay, now that one sounds a little scary.
It's not scary, I promise. It's actually pretty straightforward. Basically, it involves applying a bit of gentle pressure to the eyelids.
Gentle pressure
Yeah.
to my eyelids. I don't know about this. Trust me, it's not as bad as it sounds. Think of it like a massage, but for your eyelids. It helps to sort of manually express any blockages in the meibomian glands.
Oh, okay. So like squeezing out the gunk.
That's a good way to put it. It helps to get that oil flowing again.
So the research looked at both approaches, IPL by itself and then IPL plus this MGX.
Yep. And while more research is always a good thing, the results, they're pretty promising. Many of the studies showed that combining the two, the IPL and the MGX, was more effective than either treatment alone, at least in the short term.
Interesting. So a 1-2 punch for those stubborn meibomian glands.
Exactly. But, nothing in life is ever simple, is it? When it comes to long-term results, things get a little more nuanced.
No.
Well, while that combined approach might be more effective right off the bat, the research suggests that IPL, when it's used on its own, its benefits tend to stick around a bit longer than MGX alone.
Oh, really? Like how much longer are we talking?
Some studies showed positive effects lasting for several months, even up to a year in some cases, just from the IPL.
Wow, that's impressive. So even without the manual expression, IPL can make a real difference over time.
It seems that way. It's all about finding what works best for each individual. Some people might benefit from starting with the combined approach, while others might do just fine with IPL alone. It's a conversation to have with your eye doctor, for sure.
Makes sense. Everyone's eyes are different, just like everything else. But let's get down to brass tacks. Or are we talking about actual noticeable relief for people who are dealing with dry eyes? That's the ultimate test, right? Does it actually make people feel better?
That's what really matters. And the research, I have to say, it's pretty encouraging. A lot of the studies, they found that people with MGD, after going through IPL therapy, whether it was by itself or with that MGX we talked about, they saw real improvements.
Okay, real improvements. I like the sound of that. But what does that look like in real life? What are we talking about specifically?
Well, one of the biggies is tear film stability. Remember that oily layer we were talking about before? The one that helps keep those tears from drying up too fast?
The one our meibomian glands are supposed to be making.
That's the one. Studies have shown that after IPL, that oily layer, it actually gets more stable, hangs around longer, does its job better.
Which means?
Which means your eyes stay moist for longer, no more feeling like you need to bathe your eyeballs in artificial tears every 5 seconds.
That's a win in my book. But what about the meibomian glands themselves? Does IPL actually do anything to help them work better?
That's the really cool part. It seems like it does. Like, it's not just masking the symptoms, it's actually addressing the root cause of MGD, at least to some extent.
Okay, so what does that mean? Addressing the root cause.
It means those glands actually start functioning more normally again. The oil they produce, it becomes less thick, easier for them to, express.
And no more clogged pipes.
Ideally, no. Or at least way fewer clogged pipes. And that's what you want. It's all about restoring that natural balance to your tear film.
Giving those meibomian glands a new lease on life. But is this just a temporary fix? Or are we talking long-term relief here?
Well, that's the thing with any treatment, right? More research is always being done, but some studies have shown those positive effects from IPL sticking around for a good while. Months, sometimes even up to a year after treatment.
A year? That's amazing. Especially compared to, relying on eye drops all the time.
Right. It's a real game changer for a lot of people.
So I have to ask, when you say after treatment, does that mean this is something you have to keep doing forever once you start? Like maintenance IPL?
That's a great question and definitely something to talk to your eye doctor about. But yeah, based on what we know now, most experts recommend those maintenance treatments every so often.
So an ongoing thing for the best results.
It seems that way. Like anything else, gotta keep things flowing smoothly. But speaking of keeping things flowing smoothly, we should probably talk about safety.
Right, because as amazing as all this sounds, I imagine there are always potential downsides to consider with any kind of medical treatment.
Absolutely. And with IPL, it's no different. Overall, it is considered very safe, especially when it's done by a qualified eye care professional, someone who knows their stuff. But there are a couple of things to be aware of.
Like what?
Well, the research, it mentions that IPL, it might not be the best fit for every single skin type out there, particularly folks with darker complexions.
Oh, really? Why is that?
It has to do with melanin. Darker skin has more of it. And melanin, it absorbs more light energy. So the treatment, it might need to be adjusted a bit.
To avoid any unwanted side effects, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Things like burns or changes in pigmentation, you want to avoid that. But the good news is technology, it's always improving. Newer IPL devices, they have settings that can be adjusted for different skin tones, making it much safer.
That's good to know. It sounds like having that open conversation with your doctor is key, no matter what. They can figure out what's right for you.
Absolutely. And speaking of talking to your doctor, that's never a bad idea, right? Especially if you're dealing with persistent dry eyes.
It can make such a difference in your quality of life.
It really can. And, the exciting thing is there's so much happening in dry eye treatment right now. This paper, it just scratched the surface. There's low-level light therapy, quantum molecular resonance therapy, near-infrared light therapy. It's mind-blowing.
Sounds like the future of dry eye treatment is pretty bright.
Couldn't agree more. It's an exciting time to be in this field for sure.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to wrap things up on. If you're struggling with dry eyes, don't just accept it as your fate. Talk to your eye doctor. See what's out there, because there are solutions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Knowledge is power.
And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive into the worlds of dry eyes and IPL therapy. We hope this has given you a better understanding of this cutting-edge treatment and empowers you to have more informed conversations with your eye care provider. Until next time, stay curious, keep those eyes hydrated, and we'll catch you on the flip side.